Good morning. I am Gail Rosenthal, and I'm the director of the Sarah and Sam Schofer Holocaust Resource Center. This big book launch event for the book Love with No Tomorrow, Tales of Romance During the Holocaust, is co-sponsored by three organizations. One is Sarah and Sam Schofer Holocaust Resource Center, the Milton and Betty Katz Jewish Community Center, located in Margate, New Jersey, and our Yiddish Club. And we have the leader of our Yiddish Club with us today, Mona Traki-Oslik. Mona, would you like to say a few words?
Good morning, everyone. I would love to include everyone in this meeting to join our Yiddish Club. We meet about maybe every 2 months or so. We have very fun meetings, about 2 hour long. It could be comedy, it could be telling jokes in Yiddish, could be a movie, stories. If you would like to join it, we usually meet at my house in Margate. Please give your information in the chat room, your name and the contact information, and later today, I'm hoping that everyone will get all that information, but everyone is welcome. You don't have to really read Yiddish or know a lot of Yiddish, but to enjoy it, you have to have the Yiddishkeit, the love for the memories of speaking Yiddish, okay? So everyone is welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mona, and welcome. I'm looking at our participants. We have our Stockton students, the students interning in the Holocaust Resource Center. We have our community members and community members near and far. I see Joe Zawid is with us, who has left our community and has moved on to Florida. And then I see so many of our local survivors, their children, and educators, just because I'm looking right at Steve Marcus in front of my screen, who is in charge of our dual high school credit program. So welcome all of you. And I ask a favor, particularly of my students, to please put your video screens on, because when we're speaking, Dr. Michael Biernbaum, when Mindelle Pierce is speaking, it's so much better to be able to see a face. So please, my students, put your video photos on, put your pictures up, let us know that you're with us. And those from the community, if you're up to it, please put your cameras on so we can see you and we can feel that we're part of a community. Welcome. Our program will end at 12 o'clock. We'll begin with Dr. Michael Biernbaum, a leading scholar, historian of the Holocaust, and very much a friend of our Holocaust Resource Center and here at Stockton University. And I hope, I'm going to hold up the book, but I hope that when you read the book, do what I did, read the foreword first. And I tell a very personal story that I was in a public place, Dr. Berenbaum, when I was reading the foreword, and all of a sudden, and I'm not a crier, the tears started coming down. So thank you so much for your insight, and I hope that you will share some of that with us today. And then Dr. Berenbaum will move on and ask some questions of Mindelle Pierce, who is second generation. And again, because some of our students are with us, I just want to remind them that second generation means that their parents were Holocaust survivors, and Mindelle's parents, the Najmans, their photographs are hanging in our Holocaust Resource Center classroom. And all of my students got to read their stories last week and view the photographs. Please, as we're going along, anytime that you want, please put your questions in the chat. And I'm directing that also to my students. Please put your questions in the chat, and we will have time at the end to pose those questions. Thank you so much for joining us. And Dr. Biernbaum. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome. Good morning to everybody. I'm especially pleased to be here with Mindelle Pierce because Mindelle has put together a very important and very significant book. Let me talk about it for a couple of seconds just so that you get a sense of what it is. For many years, people denied that there was a special dimension to women's experience in the Holocaust. And when they denied there was a special thing, it wasn't out of malice to women, it was because there was the overwhelming sense that the Holocaust was about the murder of Jews. It did not discriminate men, women, and children. And for a period of time, feminists tried to say you're essentially not understanding the full dimension of the Holocaust without understanding women's experience. Let me summarize what we know about women's experience in 30 seconds, just so we're clear about it. More women died and were killed in the Holocaust than men. And the reason for that is very interesting in a couple of ways. Number one, very early on, before the full scope of the Nazi intentions were known, many men escaped, figuring that the Nazis would never kill women and children. And consequently, they left their wives, mothers, and sisters to struggle with the entire experience without them. During the period of selection at Auschwitz, for example, women and children were sent to their death. Young men who might have been young fathers were not sent to the death. They could be worked for a time before they were to be killed. And the other part of it is women played a very unique role at very special times in the Holocaust. In the period of time right after the night of the broken glass, the November pogroms, 1938, 30,000 Jewish men were arrested aged 16 to 60. And that's a period of time when women, mothers, sisters, and wives and daughters worked like a demon to be able to find a way out for the man who had in their life who had been incarcerated in the camps. And consequently, they played a very unique role of rescue. The second thing that women played a unique role in was in terms of being couriers, because Jewish men were circumcised and therefore they could be sent, could be discovered. And women were the couriers of the underground. They were the couriers between ghettos. They were the couriers between countries. And there was a feeling that most especially if a woman were blonde-haired and blue-eyed or even became blonde-haired, as some people were capable of becoming blonde-haired with peroxide, she would not be stopped where men might be stopped. The other dimension is that in the religious community, women spoke the native language very well, and their brothers and fathers who had been in yeshiva spoke with a deep accent and were not familiar with the larger culture. And then once we began to understand the unique role of women, we also spoke about the sexual violation of women. And we spoke about rape, we spoke about exploitation, we spoke about forced sex workers. I don't want to call it prostitution because they weren't prostitutes. They were forced into becoming sex slaves for the Nazis. And even though that, by the way, violated the sense of the boundaries between the Aryan and the non-Aryan, which was deep in German law. Having said that, we had a tremendous focus on that to the exclusion of something else that had happened in the Holocaust. And that was many of us knew survivors who, in circumstances of the Holocaust, when life and death were the issue, found a relationship with each other that was fused in the fire and that was one of deep and intense bonding. It might not have been a relationship that they would have found in the ordinary world. I'm coming today from a wedding, and the wedding last night, the bride and the groom were culturally similar. The bride and the groom met in graduate school. They knew each other for a long time. It was a natural wedding, but there were all sorts of circumstances in which what developed was not sexual exploitation, but deep and intense love, fused by the flames and fused, in the words of Mindelle, love where there is no tomorrow and all there is today. And if we think to the way in which we relate, the way in which we have love is all about dreaming about tomorrow. But if you have no tomorrow, then all you have is today. And then the love that you have today is all the more important and all the more impressive. So when Mindelle approached me about this book, I said, it's long overdue. It's a book that we needed, that we had to have, because it counterbalances the narrative of sexual exploitation. But let's be honest, sexual exploitation was there, sexual violence was there, the abuse of women was there. But that's not the only story that we have to tell. With that introduction, that was the nature of my forward. And I told a couple of stories. Let me tell one story, which some of you know the story of Vlad Gamid. But there's a wonderful story about Vlad Gamid. Vlad Gamid was a courier in the Warsaw Ghetto who was going to undertake very dangerous missions. And she turned to a young man and she said, I'm going she had lost her mother, her father, and her brother. I'm going, and she was deeply involved in the movement, so she had friends. But in that sense, she didn't have something else. She turned to the man who later became her husband. She says, I'm going somewhere. I can't tell you where I'm going. I can't tell you what I'm about to do, but if I don't come back, I want somebody to care. Therefore, you can be my boyfriend. And that became a wonderful, the glue that fused a love, that fused a marriage, that was a marriage for almost half a century or more. Now, with that introduction, let me turn to Mindelle. Mindelle, tell me why you wrote this book and tell me about the story of your parents. But please, Mindelle, unmute yourself before you begin. Mindelle, you're still muted lower.
Oh,
Okay,
I'm
now
unmuted.
we hear you.
Okay, thank you. During my entire life, my parents talked about how they met in Paris and their love story to my brother Robert and myself. And I said to myself, as I became an adult and I got involved with a project in Philadelphia, Transcending Trauma, the trauma of the Holocaust, we had to interview survivors and find out and examine how they rebuilt their lives after the Holocaust. And my son, Micah, Rabbi Micah Becker-Klein, was standing in the house with me, my parents, and said, can you tell me the story of what happened to you during the Holocaust? And we found that survivors rarely refuse requests of grandchildren. And while we were standing at the door, we started, because we always carried, at that time, we carried this big, heavy video camera. And we opened it up because we always had it with us. And we started interviewing my parents. We submitted it to the Transcending Trauma project, which is still going on now. And this is how my children and my grandchildren and I learned about my parents' love story in Paris. I then decided that since my parents had a love story, perhaps other survivors did. And my parents belonged near Riverdale, near Avi Weiss's shul, a large community of Holocaust survivors. And they gathered every week to get together for programs and clubs. And sometimes I went and I started talking to some of the survivors and about their stories. And sure enough, they had love stories. And then when Ira and I traveled in this country, out of this country, wherever we went, we conversation came up about survivors, about World War II. And then we were able to do it on our cell phones as time marched on. And I started collecting many, many, many interviews of people. And then I decided that it was time to bring love, which I found incredible, it was able to surface in the flames of hatred broiling in Europe.
Mindelle, tell me about what the most, tell us a couple of examples of some of the stories that you capture in the book.
Okay, so one of the stories would be the Bow story, Joseph and Rebecca Bow. This was in the Plashkov concentration camp. Joseph was drawing, was somebody who learned calligraphy, and Amen Goth, who was the commander, the vicious commander of the Plashkov concentration camp, demanded that Joseph do a detailed map of the camp because he wanted to enlarge in the camp. So he wanted him to use his calligraphy skills and draw a map.
And our listeners should understand, this is the camp in which Schindler, this is the camp you saw in Schindler's List. And this is Amnon Goeth, who was one of the cruel commanders, commandants of the camps. He doesn't have to take second place to many.
Exactly. All the survivors.
The bastard.
Right. So he draws the map for the commandant, and Amen Goth was happy with it. And he said, well, you know, I need 2 copies, 2 more. So I need 3 copies of what you've just done. And in those days, there were no Xerox machines. There was no way to make a copy unless you used light sensitive paper. And the other key ingredient is you needed the sunshine, because the sunshine, when interacted with the paper, would make a copy. So he says, but Herr Commandant, I can't make copies today. It is, there's no sunshine.
It's cloudy.
And he puts a gun to, Amen Goth puts a gun to his head, and he says, I need a copy, 2 copies by the end of today. So, and if you do not do it, and he puts the gun right to his temple, he said, you're dead. You're a dead man. So now it is below 0 outside in the camp. It is the winter. And he is walking back and forth, saying, where is the sun? Where is the sun? He's holding the blueprint and the paper to the sun, hoping that the clouds would kind of dissipate and the sunshine would come out. Then a woman, Rebecca, who becomes his wife, Rebecca walks past him and thinks, it's toward the end of the war, she thinks he is signaling airplanes in the sky to bomb this camp. This is what she said, what are you doing? What are you doing? He says to her, will you be my sunshine? And it was, no one ever talked with that way to a woman in the camp. She just never heard anybody flirting, anybody doing any endearment. And she said, you're crazy, this is ridiculous. Leave me alone, I'm not doing this. Anyhow, she leaves him, and she goes back to what she was doing. She had just been the manicurist for Amen Goth. This was her job. She would be the manicurist for Amen Goth, and Amen Goth had a knife on the table while she was manicuring him. And he said, if you nick my hand, you're dead. So anyhow, she had just finished the manicuring. She was going back to her bunk. And he is standing outside with the, again, begging, saying, please be my sunshine. You will be my sunshine. And she left him. And after she left him, the sun came out. and he did get the copies for Almond Gulf. He actually went and collected some flowers that he found laying around the camp to make a bouquet to give her to thank him. And he left them in the office of somebody and said, please give this, please make sure that she gets the bouquet. And the man in the office said, are you crazy? You can't give flowers to anybody in the camp. It's a nice thought, can't do it. If Almond Gulf finds out, you're dead. So the man in the office throws the flowers away, but he went and he told Rebecca that somebody wanted to give you flowers to thank you for what you did today, just uplifting his spirits of the day. And they started seeing each other a few minutes here and a few minutes there, and they fell in love. Time went on, and he said, Rebecca, let's get married. She said, are you crazy? Who's getting married in this place of death, horror, disease? No. He said, we don't know, just what Michael had referred to, we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. Let's get married here in the camps. And she finally said, okay. Now he traded in his rations of bread, 4 rations of bread for somebody to get some silver spoons. A few days later, he traded in other rations of bread to a jeweler who took the silver spoons and then fashioned them into 2 wedding rings. He then gave this to his mother to hold in bunk 13 at the camp. And his mother happened to have been in the same bunk as Rebecca. A few days later, the difference between what the man wore and what the women wore in the camp was the head covering. The women wore a kerchief around their head tied, and the man wore kind of a cap. So he took off his cap and he put a kerchief on, and he went into the women's bunk, and their mother, his mother, performed the wedding ceremony. They got married in the bunk. This is the only people that did get married in a concentration camp. And they did get married. And the women in the bunk, there were like 10 women sleeping on one of the beds that were made for, let's say, 2 people, gave them privacy after their wedding. And they had some time together. And then afterwards, he left the bunk and he snuck back. He knew that he would have to go back to his bunk. He would have to cross to get back into the men's bunks. He had to cross a wired fence. Now, he was afraid that he had to climb over the fence. He didn't want to touch the fence. It would be electrified. He didn't know what to do. He finally said, I have to go back. Otherwise everyone will be murdered in my bunk when they do the roll call. I'm going back. And for some reason, the fence that night, the electrification in the fence was not working. He was able to safely get back to the bunk, and he everything worked out well, and they were married in the camp. This marriage lasted many, many decades. They moved after the Holocaust, after he was liberated, they moved to Israel. And Rebecca and Joseph Bow, through the children, Shlila and Hadass, have a little museum in the middle of Tel Aviv that showcases this entire story. And he became an animator. He became the Walt Disney of Israel. And we then found out that through his calligraphy skills that he learned pre-Holocaust, he forged the papers for Eichmann when they Mossad smuggled Eichmann to get out of Argentina. Mr. Bow, Joseph, smuggled the passport. He forged it. He made it look as though he had a passport, and they were able to transport him to Israel, so he would be able to go on trial in Israel. They did not.
Yeah,
want-
for our students who don't know the background, Adolf Eichmann was captured in Argentina by Israeli Mossad agents. And the question is, how do you get him to Israel? They essentially dressed him up as an El Al crewman, as if he was drugged. As if he were drunk. They essentially drugged him. But in order to do that, he needed a passport to get out of the country. And this was the man who essentially forged the passport for Eichmann. And you have to understand the irony of that, because Eichmann was the man who had deported all the Jews and essentially had confiscated passports and made them valueless and useless to save a life. And therefore, there was a forged passport that essentially brought him to trial in Israel. So it's an extraordinary story. Do us a favor and tell us another. There were people who would have not otherwise married at all, except for the events of the Holocaust. One of the things that you know, for example, is resistance fighters. Women needed the protection of a man in the forests, because without the protection of a man, they would be violated continually by anybody. The men felt that they were fighting and therefore they deserved the prerogatives of the reward. So women, and you had urban women meeting peasant men and and essentially forging a relationship. One of the most famous of them was the Belsky brothers, who also ended up with urban women, and these were peasant men who had been farmers. Tell us a story of the unusual. You've told us a story that brought tears to everyone's eyes, but tell us a story about an unusual relationship that probably could have never developed except for the Holocaust.
Meaning, what are you referring to? That they came from different walks of life?
Different walks of life, different backgrounds, etc.
I'm trying to think. Which one? Do you have one in mind, Michael, that you remember?
Well, I don't remember one from the book, but I do remember them. Years ago, we had a very interesting recollection. There's a woman who was interviewed many years ago by Yale. Yale started its interviews in 1979, so this is 42 years ago. Her name is Helen Kay. And Helen Kay was a beautiful 16-year-old girl. And her parents turned to her and said, "We want you to marry the richest man in the ghetto." Who's the richest man in the ghetto? The richest man in the ghetto is the baker. And why is the baker the richest man in the ghetto? Because if you have any food in the ghetto, the baker has food, and therefore you avoid starvation. So here's a young girl who marries a significantly older baker. And they, by the way, stay married after the war, and they, raised a family. He remained a baker. And a young girl who marries that because that is her key to survival. And the only reason that she and her family could survive the experience of the ghetto. But tell us about your own parents' story.
Okay. Michael, my parents were both born in Poland, and both came to Paris 1938 for different reasons. My father came, Jack Nashman, a blessed memory. He came to Paris to visit his sister, Helen, and Helen had just had a baby. So he wanted to visit her, and he missed her. So he wanted to come, and he went there. He had incredible tailoring skills. He was a tailor since he was 10 years old. So his brother-in-law, my Aunt Helen's husband, Mordecai, got him a job the next day. He was already tailoring in Paris in a flat, they had about 12 sewing machine tables, and people would sew, tailor, mostly women, all day. But my father's papers was stamped sans profession, without professional. You couldn't work here in Paris. You're just a tourist visitor. So you're not allowed to work. So the man who owned the little sewing machine business said, Jack, I'm taking a chance on you. If the police come and investigate, I'm showing you a closet where you are to hide. They cannot see you. They'll find your papers. It is stamped, not allowed to work. I will be arrested. So my father did have to hide a few times, but he was an incredible sewer and a tailor, and he made twice as much money as the other people tailoring because he was that quick, even though he was paid half the amount because the man was taking a chance on him. So he was working as a tailor. He was able to support himself. He lived in a little hotel at the end of Warnard Street. We saw it's still around, and the Lafayette. And that's his story in Paris. My mother, Rose Najman, was on an adventure with 3 women. They decided, we're leaving Poland and we're going to the World's Exposition in Poland. There was a in Paris.
In Paris.
Excuse me. Yeah. And Picasso's most famous mural by the Spanish pavilion, every country had a pavilion called Guernica, was a pavilion that showcased that famous painting. And the painting was a mural that said to the world, a message to the world. We had a war in Spain. No war should be happening again. The mural had people being dismembered. It had animals that were dead. It had cities and towns that were burning. Guernica was a town actually in Spain. And he said, no war. It is not going to help anybody. And this was their peace statement at the World's Fair. So my mother went with 3 girls, 3 women. They were young women. And that's why she was in Paris. And that's the reason they both came to Paris.
And how did they meet?
They met because my mother was sitting in the same building that my father came for his meals at his sister's house. My mother was sitting in the flat on the 1st floor. My father was on the 4th floor. There was a winding staircase because we visited the building. You went upstairs to the 4th floor. And while my mother's saying, what am I going to do? I just got a letter, and I have the letter actually in my house from her sister Rachel. It said, you cannot come back to Poland. Do not do anything you have to do. Don't dare come back to this country again. And she said she didn't know what to do. And she told this to Rachel, who she was visiting. And Rachel said, I know a man. He's on the 4th floor. He is applying, in the process of applying with this paper trail of documents that you needed to come to America. You needed, first of all, you needed somebody to sponsor you. So you needed a verification form from somebody in America that said, if I sponsor you to come to America, I will financially take care of you. But that wasn't enough for you to write that letter. You needed to submit an income tax form from the government to prove that you did have the resources to support the person that you were sponsoring.
Let me interrupt only for 1 second to
Go ahead.
explain. You had to have what they called an LPC document, likely to become public charge. And we didn't want to receive immigrants who might have need of social assistance. And consequently, whoever sponsored them had to prove that they had enough money to be able to sponsor them, and they wouldn't become a public charge. The second document that they required, most especially in Germany, was something called a certificate of good conduct. And you have to imagine what it's like to go, if you're a Jew, to a certificate of good conduct from the Gestapo. So your parents were required, your father was required to have the people sponsoring him show that they had enough income so he would not likely to become a public charge. Continue, I'm sorry, Mindelle.
Also, Michael, I did find recently that my father also had a document that I didn't know he even needed that showed that he was never in prison in Poland. And then picture, Poland isn't getting involved in the war. They're going to really want to look through their papers and send a document to a Jewish person who was emigrating to America. It took him a long time to get that document, and I have it at home, that showed that he was a good citizen in Poland. And
That's the certificate of good conduct.
Okay.
Hasn't been arrested, doesn't have an outstanding warrant, wasn't in prison. All of that was absolutely important. So continue.
Okay, so
So fourth floor and first floor.
First
How
floor.
how do first floor and fourth floor meet?
Okay, then we
Because
have a
that-
meeting. So she goes up to the fourth floor and says, Jack, I have somebody, a meeting in my house, a friend of mine, Rose. She can't go back to Poland. Her family said, don't come back, do anything. What, can you help her? I know you're in the process of emigrating to America. You're working on your papers. Please come down and help her. So she goes up to the winding fourth floor, comes back down, and takes one look at my beautiful mother and says, okay, let's go out for coffee, Rose. And they went out for coffee. And I will show you what I had to do in order to come to America. These are the papers you need. And she said, she was overwhelmed with the process. So of course, my father started helping her with the process. They started seeing each other a great deal because of that. And actually part of their courtship, and this is especially for Mona, they went to Yiddish singing clubs on Sundays in Paris, in which they would have sing-alongs. In other words, the men would sing one part of the song, like Gebertig's melodies, and the men sang another part of the song. And one of the songs was My Liebe Raisela. My mother's Yiddish name is Raisel. So my parents always sang that song growing up. And they told me they sang it in Paris at these clubs. You had coffee and a pastry, and they had sing-alongs. So my father helped my mother navigate the process. And she found her uncle who would sponsor her in the United States, and he helped her write the letter. And that's how her process went along.
And then how did they get out of France?
I didn't hear you, I'm sorry.
How did they get out of France?
How did they get out of France?
And for everybody to understand, 1939, Poland is invaded. So your mother's told, Raisel is told she cannot come back to Poland. The situation in Poland is bad and it's getting worse. France is still not touched. That doesn't happen till May and June of 1940. So there's a year period of time, but how do they get out of France and come to the United States?
My father told my mother, you have all your papers in order first. She got all the documents, the many documents that you needed, and visas. And you needed a document to go from one part of France into Vichy, which was southern France. So she got that document, and he said, you can't wait for me. I'm waiting for my last document. You have to go by yourself. And he put her on a train, and he paid for what he called, the word in Yiddish is a macha, like an expediter. He paid for somebody to help her get across the border between the Nazi-occupied France and Free France. And she went over the border and she settled herself in Vichy, France, waiting for my father. Finally, my father's papers do arrive in France, and he is now going to get on the train that leaves from Nazi France to Free France, and he does have his papers and orders, except for one thing. My father had to report to the Prefecture of Police in Paris every single month in order to get a stamp on his papers that showed that he was not working because he was not allowed to work. So he had to go to the prefecture. They questioned him every month. They put a stamp on his passport. He was afraid to go for his last stamp because he knew he was going to be leaving Paris, excuse me, and he did not go for his last check to the prefecture of the police. When he got on the train in Paris to get off in Vichy to meet my mother, the Germans got on the train and there were 4 people sitting with a table, 2 men on one side, 2 men on the other side. The Germans checked person 1 paper, they were okay, passports and other travel documents. He checked person 2. They checked person 3, and now my father is getting quite agitated. And my aunt, who's looking through the window of the train, knows his papers did not have the last stamp. And the whistle of the train blew, and the German officers exited the train. They never had a chance to check to see if my father's papers were in order. So he relaxed for a while, but then when he got into Vichy and he had to get off the train, he had the same problem. They checked your papers when you got off the train. He told me he was thinking of jumping off the train before they got to the Vichy stop, but he got nervous because the train was going at an accelerated speed. Stays on the train, he gets off the train. The German officers are checking the papers of everybody exiting. My mother went for 7 days, my mother went to the train station to meet every train because she didn't know exactly when he was arriving. He did send her a telegram saying Dr. Miller performed the operation. It was a success. I have the telegram. I said, Dad, who's Dr. Miller? What is that about? Dr. Miller was the man who gave out the papers in the embassy that you were able to use when you traveled. And my mother knew the name. So my mother knew it was not the doctor. She knew he would be arriving on a train. She didn't know when. So after waiting for several days for different trains, the train is arriving with my father into Vichy. He did not jump off the train. And she was so excited to seeing him. She was standing next to the German officers that were checking the papers. She was so excited to see him that she said, Chérie, chérie, which means in French, darling, darling. And she started kissing him. And the German officers said, oh, go away. Go away with him. You and Jack, well, he didn't know his name. You and that man, go away. So they never checked the papers that my father had, which
And
were
that answers a question that somebody had asked. How much luck was involved? Every survivor will tell you that they survived because of a 4-letter word. 3 of the letters are UCK, but the first letter is the most important, which is luck. They're telling you a half truth because everybody needed to be lucky, because everybody knew someone smarter, wiser, braver, tougher, richer, more important, who didn't have luck, was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Luck ran out and they were dead. But it also took skill and initiative, courage, and people were making life and death decisions virtually by the moment. Let me add one more thing, and then we're going to take some questions, which is that You see the progress of the war in this story. War starts in 1939 in Poland. It then arrives in France, and France is divided between, and Mindelle used the term, used two terms. She used the term of German-occupied France and Vichy France, and then she used Free France. Vichy France was a collaborationist government that cooperated with the Germans all the way through. And it was technically called Free France because Germany did not occupy that, but it was anything but free, both for the German, for the French, and most especially for the Jews, because a collaborationist government participated in the deportation of Jews to transit camps and then turned them over to the Germans, who would send them to Auschwitz and other camps. Erwin, you have some questions for us. So let's ask Erwin to unmute.
Thank you, Dr. Berenbaum. Before I ask some of the questions, I want to recognize two Holocaust survivors who are both with us here today on this Zoom. They both have excellent written memoirs. Maud Dame, author of Chocolate, the Taste of Freedom, and Rosalie Simon, author of Girl in a Striped Dress. Gail Rosenthal will write their names and titles of their memoirs in the Zoom chat box. The first question that we have, Dr. Berenbaum, is for you. Why are these love stories important, and are there lessons for today using these stories?
The first is an easy question to answer. These stories are important because they counterbalance the human experience is broad. The human experience is wide. The human experience is diverse. If all we're going to focus on is sexual violation, rape, enforced enslavement, sex slaves, and the like, we're only going to capture one part of it. And I'm always interested in what is the other part of the story in which Jews are not only victims, but they're also actors, in which they have agency, they are doing something on their own. And this provides us with that opportunity, with the opportunity to understand what people were able to do. In Mindelle's case, her parents were able, through their own love, and it happened that they were both young. It happened that Mindelle's mother was beautiful. That generally is a form of attraction for some young men, and the like. And they were able to rescue each other and provide for each other in circumstances in which other people were murdered. And this again is the power of people to affect change in their lives. And I believe that that has a serious implication for us today. And it also has a serious implication. Let me give you a non-Holocaust example. I had a friend who was suffering from young man in his late 30s, early 40s, which for students may seem old, but for many of us seems reasonably young, was suffering with cancer and therefore had very few tomorrows. And a woman whom he was working with in theater fell in love with him, and they lived intensely for a period of about a year and a half, brought joy to each other, and then there was loss. So the lesson is that if you have the opportunity for love and meaning and purpose, and to be with another human being, even when tomorrow is uncertain, take it today, because that has a very important implication. Erwin, let's ask the next question, please.
Yes. Mindelle, this question is for you. How did you choose the love stories in your book? And the second part to that is, how did you interview the Holocaust survivors?
Thank you. First, I interviewed the Holocaust survivors on video and with taking notes, because many times I had to go back to listen to the video while I was writing the story, or go call them up, or then sometimes they couldn't get them. But basically, I did most of it through video interviews. Everyone is on video. I'm thinking of a documentary now of doing something with that. What was the second part? I'm sorry, I forgot the other part.
How did you choose the love stories? What process did you use?
I just asked the people that I met, the survivors, to just give me, a few minutes, which always landed up to be an hour, summary of what happened. And I thought about it, I collected them, and then I went and interviewed the ones that I thought had the most meaning and showed the power of love, that I would be able to highlight in the book. Thank you.
I think from the outside, I can give a simple answer. In many respects, the love stories, if you read them, the love stories chose themselves. In other words, Mindelle was the vehicle, but really these were love stories that were wanting to come out and that have a power to them and a passion to them, an ethos to them, and a meaning to them that's very special. That's what makes this, that's what gives this book a unique character. And by the way, we should point out that in a couple of cases, the romance that was forged in the circumstances of desperation didn't work out and didn't make it all the way, and ended up in divorce, sometimes even bitter divorce. So this is not an eyes closed romanticization of the Holocaust. It's really trying to show another dimension. Sometimes people who can do things in extreme, in circumstances where the pressure is one of life and death, and the intensity of that life and death, don't quite make it when there's not that type of danger lurking, which gives the love itself a heroic dimension. Erwin, let's take some more questions, please.
I want to ask this because I know I've been asked several times. Mindelle, how can we purchase your book?
How can we purchase the book?
Ira, I'm the husband. Okay. It's very easy. You can go to Amazon, or you can just put the title Love with No Tomorrow, and you can even get it in a discount at another couple of places. It's readily available online. Just put Love with No Tomorrow and put the word Amazon after it, and you'll get the link.
Okay, Ira, would you do us a favor while we're taking the next question? Just put that in the chat so everybody gets it.
I'll send the link. I'll send the link.
You'll send the link. Okay. Thank you, Ira.
You're welcome.
And Mindelle, some guests have indicated that they have children and grandchildren. At what age do you recommend your book to?
My book, I would say probably middle school, maybe 8th grade, 7th or 8th grade can start, in my opinion.
When Erwin, I would also add, when young men and young women think and dream of love, and not love of a parent for a child, which they have as a young age, that comes in everybody's. And for some of you, it's when you're in your 40s and not when you're 10. There comes a time in everybody's life when they think of love, and they think of love not in terms of what they receive from parents and family, but what they receive from a male or female who becomes their peer, their life partner, et cetera, et cetera. So that happens at different ages. This is not a gruesome book, but it's not a book for young children. And I say that as a person who prides himself on being a pretty good teacher.
Thank you, Dr. Berenbaum. And some of our participants have indicated, Mindelle, there is something, an object in the back of you with writing. Do you know what that is?
Yes. The thing that's behind me is a wedding canopy. My parents never really had a joyous communal wedding. They got married in the street by this pious man that they wanted 7 brokers from. They got married in the mayor's office in a civil service. Then they got married on the Navamar. They were on the last boat out of Spain to Europe. The rabbi was on the boat and he said,
Out of
to my
Spain,
father,
out of Spain to the United States.
excuse me, out of Spain to the United States. Actually, it made the New York Times. This is this boat, because it was the last boat, made the New York Times front page.
Now, everybody's going to ask, why is it the last boat? And the answer is because that's the moment just before the United States entered the war. And once the United States entered the war, the boats coming, and that's after December 7th, December 9th, December 11th, 1941. And think of today's date, which is this week, 80 years ago, we entered World War II. And after that moment, all shipments across the Atlantic were for military purposes and primarily military purposes alone, and all vessels were subject to attack. So when you say that Mindele's parents escaped just in the nick of time, think of what it means to be on the last boat too. So let's not let that pass unmentioned, because again, think of the way in which her parents were engaged with the whole progress of the war. War in Poland, division of France, World War II for the United States after December 7th, 1941.
And they did not know that the boat made any newspaper. I found it when they were alive, maybe 30 years ago, and while I was doing research, and they were shocked. And then I framed it, of course, and hung it in their house, but they never knew how important this boat was. They never realized that it was the last boat. It took 49 days, a 7-day trip on the Atlantic became 49 because they were avoiding the bombing from the Luftwaffe from above and the U-boats, the Nazi U-boats from below. So they had to zigzag and take a route that was not straight. So but they never complained. They said, thank God we're on a boat out of Europe where we're safe. So we never heard. Many of the people on the boat were extremely wealthy, and they did sue. They sued the boat line for horrendous trips. Some people died, there wasn't enough food, but my parents said, always, I would never get into a lawsuit. They contacted my parents to be part of it. And they said, we are so blessed and thankful that we got out of Europe. We don't want to be any part of a lawsuit against the shipping company. And it was sunk on the way back. It was sunk.
Erwin, give us all of your remaining questions and we'll each have time for one answer.
There's one question. Mindelle, can you share with us your father's story on September 11th?
Yes. On September 11th, my father was in a doctor's visit, a doctor's appointment, urologist, near the World Trade Center. And Ira, my husband, calls the doctor's office and says, you can't go home on the train. He wouldn't let anyone take him to the doctor because he was extremely independent, even though when he was in his 90s, I wanted to go with him. He said no. So Ira calls and says, don't go home by train. There are no more trains running. There was a terrible accident. And he explained what happened at the World Trade Center to my father. And he said, wait for me. And he said, no, I'm not waiting for you. I'm leaving. So buses in New York went maybe 20 blocks, and you got on and off a bus. They had to get all the way back to he had to get all the way back to the north part of the Bronx. And he took 5 buses. They went 20 blocks, got off, 20 blocks, got off. And the last bus was in northern Manhattan called Washington Heights. He gets off the bus in Washington Heights, and no more buses. And he had no cell phone at the time. The payphone lines were huge. He said, I'm not calling either my daughter Mindelle or my mother, his wife. I am just going to walk home from Washington Heights. So at the age of 92, he walked home from Washington Heights with many miles. He gets in, it's towards evening now, and he walks in, it's September 11th, and he walks in the door, and everyone is sitting vigil around the dining room table. Cousins are there, I'm there, neighbors are there, aunts and uncles are there. Thank God you're alive, he said. And he says, big spiel. That's the first word he said. First, I got to call Shira, my youngest daughter. It's her birthday. Second of all, what are you worried about me? I was, and he was fighting in the French-Polish army. He had the opportunity to go to England to fight with Churchill. And they would regroup there. And the commander said, anybody who wants to leave can leave now. This group is going to Churchill, to England. Churchill is sending us boats and he will pick us up. And my father steps forward with 3 men. He said, I am not going to England. And the commander said, Jack, you're crazy. What do you mean? You're Jewish. You can't go back to Paris. You will intersect with the invading German army. What do you mean? You're going to walk back to Paris? And this is the end of the love story. He said, my wife, Rose, she is in Paris. I think, I don't know what happened to her. I will not be safe and go to England without finding out and making sure that my Rose is safe. And he does walk back on foot, the whole thing. Little times he got rides, some people, even bribes. He even got a ride from German officers because he hid who he was, and they felt pity on him, and they took him. He landed up in Versailles, and then he got back to Paris. This is 10 days later, and he runs to my mother's apartment, and he says, no, she's not there. He didn't know she was evacuated with women and children by the Red Cross. And he finally finds her through this immense paper trail through the Red Cross. She comes back from her hiding place, and they were married for many, many long, happy years after, never separated, always a tremendous love affair between them.
So let's conclude then, Erwin and Mindelle, with, remember, this is about 2 4-letter words, both of them with L's, love and luck. And if what we've just heard about a description of a man who chooses to be reunited with a woman rather than seek safety, by the way, safety meaning continuing the battle in England, because it wasn't going to be only safety in England, but evacuation to England to continue the war, but goes back to Paris and ends up being able to immigrate to the United States. That took love and that took luck. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Hanukkah to those of you who are Jewish and celebrating the 7th and soon to be the 8th day of Hanukkah. And Mindelle, thank you very much. I look forward to everybody reading the book. Thank you, Gail.
And thank you, everyone. And let's all put our videos on just to give a wave to each other. Stay safe, be well. Thank you, Mindelle. I've read the book. I highly recommend it. Thank you, Dr. Berenbaum. More than a friend to our Holocaust Center here at Stockton University. Thank you to the Yiddish Club, their leadership under Mona. Thank you to our local Jewish Community Center. Thank you. Stay safe, be well,